My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask you for pardon of my sins and grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Lord Jesus, thank you for this Easter octave. Each of these 8 days is a replay of your resurrection. We hear this in the liturgy of the church and in the Gospels. It's like a song that is played over and over again. Christ is alive. He hasn't changed. In today's Gospel, I find myself by the Sea of Galilee. This is where the love story of your chosen ones had begun. You had made friends with them there, and that bond had grown. Your friends, Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael, yes, Nathanael, the one who had first doubted whether anything good could come from Nazareth. And you promised him, Nathanael, greater things you shall see. And he was about to see those greater things. And at that moment, now that we see in the gospel today, you were not with them. You had been crucified, and there they were. They might have been lost in a world of nostalgia, thinking those were the good times, in some way relegating you to a memory, something of the past. Jesus was with us. Now he's not. Maybe they were engaged in some chit-chat about this and that, but I'm inclined to think that they were just moping about your absence. And Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. Enough is enough. Let's do some work. I'm going fishing. And they said to him, we also will come with you. So they went out and got into the boat. But that night they caught nothing. Now, this wasn't the first time that Simon had had this kind of an experience. And he remembered Galilee. About 3 years before, he found himself in a similar situation. He had been casting his nets in the Sea of Galilee, working late in the night. And it was frustrating, because he needed to catch fish. That's how he earned his daily bread. And that night, every time he cast the nets into the water and pulled out the nets, nothing. Again, casting and pulling in nothing. The frustration built up. I have to pay my taxes. Throwing out the nets again and trying to pull them in, nothing. I have to look after my wife. What am I going to do? And again, casting the nets. And then nothing. I have to look after my mother-in-law who's at home. And you, Jesus, were in his boat and you said something to him. Simon, put out into the deep and lower your nets for a catch. Peter's initial reaction, that's ridiculous. We've been up all night. But then he said, okay, Lord, at your command, I will do whatever you're saying. And he was overwhelmed at the catch. He even had to call in James and John to give him a hand. And then you said those words to Simon Peter, do not be afraid. From now on, you will be a fisher of men. Yes, Simon remembered Galilee, the beginning of his vocation. What a joy. So many good memories. Was this really something of the past? Suddenly, Peter is awakened, like when someone clicks his fingers in front of you when you get carried off into another world. Someone broke the silence. Friends, have you caught anything to eat? Now, the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. They answered him, no, we haven't caught anything. So he said to them, cast the net over the right side of the boat and you'll find something. So they cast it and were not able to pull it in because of the number of fish. That's the trigger. John, who 3 years earlier had seen the first miraculous catch with Peter in Galilee, remembers and tells Peter, "It is the Lord." Peter was ecstatic and jumped into the sea to come and meet you. He hadn't fully understood that you are alive. And this is what the church, through her liturgy, plays over and over again for these 8 days of the octave. Christ is alive. He hasn't changed. Peter remembered Galilee, where it had all started. His friendship with you, Jesus, had started. I now live in a country far away from my native hometown. Thanks be to God, I'm very happy where I am. Nonetheless, about a year ago, I was fortunate enough to visit my hometown. And so many memories flowed in like a waterfall. Above all, memories of different relationships in my life, places I'd been, growing up. I remember the first prayers that my parents taught me when I was preparing for my first Holy Communion, 10 years old. I remember certain friendships from my primary school and secondary school, which to this day, a number of them are still alive. And how can I forget being a rebellious teenager and one day bumping into you, Lord Jesus? Yes, I remember that. I remember when I started discovering your mercy in the sacrament of confession. I still recall even some pieces of advice I received in the confessional. I recall a friend who encouraged me to keep struggling. And he said, "Why don't you read this book, The Faith Explained?" And I thought, a book? Oh boy, how boring. And then when I started reading that book, I thought, this is amazing. My faith, this is so cool. It was the beginning, and I read the next book, which was Mary of Nazareth, and another, and another. That was my Galilee. Going back home just helped me to remember the beginning of my own Christian vocation, the lighting up of my vocation within me. That's how Simon Peter remembered the moment he met you, Jesus. The Pope, at the Easter Vigil this year, just about a week ago, said, "Remember your own Galilee and walk towards it, for it is the place where you came to know Jesus personally, where he stopped being just another personage from a distant past, but a living person. Not some distant God, but the God who is at your side, who more than anyone else knows you and loves you. Remember that powerful experience of the Spirit, that great joy of forgiveness experienced after that one confession, that intense and unforgettable moment of prayer, that light that was kindled within you and changed your life. Christ is alive. He hasn't changed. You, Jesus, were there for Simon Peter and for John and the other apostles at the moment you called them, but also later to sustain them in their struggle. And Jesus, I want you to remind me today that you are alive. You don't change. Sometimes I may go through difficult moments. What are those things that make me suffer right now? Do I sometimes get lost in a world of nostalgia, how things were, and forget that you are alive today and now? Am I impulsive and drawn by my feelings and forget that, even if I don't feel like praying, I can pray because you are there. Remember your Galilee. It might have started maybe with a friend telling you about this podcast, 10 Minutes with Jesus. Could have happened that you went to confession and there are these words of encouragement that you received that helped you to start. Remember your Galilee. Remind yourself. Today, relive that memory. Return to that first encounter. Remember and keep moving forward. Return to him and rediscover the grace of God's resurrection within you. Return to Galilee. Return to your Galilee. When I return to my Galilee, I also remember how Mary, my mother, was there, and how I desire that each person on this podcast, when you return to your Galilee, you will realize that Mary is always there. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask you for help to put them into effect. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.